Okay, so in the last video we put together our profit. We did an optimization. We figured out the profit is going to be $6.408 million by making 1,000 compact cars, 202 mid-size minivans, and 1 large minivan. So now let's go and let's look at all of our constraints and figure out which ones are binding. Remember, always going to have one binding constraint. So if I look at steel, I have 20 tons of steel left. If I look what's required in tonnage, I can make any number of vehicles. So this is a non-binding constraint. I have steel left over. I have slack steel. I could be making more cars. So let's look at labor. So labor, we've got 5 hours of slack in the time. And if I go up here and I look at the labor hours for all the cars, this is a binding constraint. There's nothing I can do without more time. So if I wanted to make more cars, I would need to add more labor hours in. So I do have the steel, I do not have the time. Now let's look at our capacity constraints. Well, the upper limit of production we just kind of faked in anyway, so those don't matter. But the lower limits of production. And as we can see, minivans are above the threshold, large minivans are above the threshold. But we are producing the absolute minimum number of compact cars. This is a binding constraint. We would make less compact cars if we were able to, because the profit margin on those is not as high as the other ones. And the only reason that we're making 1,000 of them is because we have to. We're constrained by that lower limit on production. Okay, so the least number of cars is binding, the amount of labor hours is binding, and then let's make this cap. And then our steel is non-binding. Okay, so if I wanted to make more cars, what would I do? Well, we either lower the lower limit of production here, we up the amount of labor hours that we have. So let's go and say, and just to show this, let's say that the compact car, let's drop it to a minimum of 500 and see what happens. So data solver, and then we solve, hit OK. And you'll see that actually the product mix actually changes too. Profit goes up by about almost $100,000, about $94,000. We've changed the lower limit to 500, and you'll notice we're making a lot more of the mid-size minivans now because we're able to drop that constraint. So what else happens? Well, let's look at this. So that is no longer a binding constraint. It's not a binding constraint over here. So if we look at the steel, well, the steel has now become a binding constraint because we're using all of the steel. And so if I look at labor hours here, labor hours, that is 35 hours left. That is now no longer a binding constraint because we can't make any more mid-size minivans, but we could make another compact car. So with that change, now we have, and I'm missing on my keyboard as I try to type, we now have a non-binding constraint on the labor. Would probably help if I put an N in there. So now we have that non-binding constraint on the labor. So this is our only binding constraint now. So let's see, we need another 10 hours to make one more minivan. Actually, no, labor hours is non-binding. So if I wanted to make one more compact car, let's say that we can put in a special, let's say we can get a ton of, excuse me, let's say that we can get 30 tons of steel and it will cost us less than $2,000, so it'd be a good business decision. We'll go and we'll change that to 30. Add another 30 tons of steel there. We run solver again. Hit OK. And so still use all of the steel. We've gone up a little bit because, well, I was sitting there thinking, oh, we'll just make another compact car. But you see, we shuffled the mix around a little bit, and it's like, okay, so if we've got some more steel, we're just going to actually make more of the mid-size minivans. Still, the binding constraint here still is a non-binding constraint. And there we go. So this is how we can use the binary variables to create both an upper and lower limit on what's going on. And this will be actually useful in some of the assignments and stuff that we do in the class. So with that, that is the end of the video. If you have any questions, please contact me. And if not, I will see you in the next video.